Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to all attendees and to our guest to our career development seminar series, The Third Way. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Professor Sarah Montano from University of Birmingham to today's seminar. And Sarah's talk is entitled Education, Endurance, and, oh my goodness.
Excellence.
Excellence. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Sorry. So just a few words. I've met, we haven't met directly with Sarah before, but I keep hearing your name as someone who is really proactive, education-focused professor, and you're a retailing specialist. I've watched you host a panel discussion on retailing on YouTube. And I thought that's really amazing. So then I reached out to Sarah, invited her to to talk about her education journey on our career seminar. Really delighted that Sarah agreed. So Professor Sarah is now currently a Deputy Education Director in Digital. Is that right, isn't it? For College of Social Sciences at University of Birmingham. And you're particularly passionate about digital innovation and digital education, and you held a pioneering role in starting up the very first ever online-only MBA that was accredited by Association of Business MBA, sorry. So that's really interesting and really inspiring. And you held various academic leadership roles, and we'll be really looking forward to hearing more about those. And you're, as I said already, very passionate about digital innovations, really timely in the era of artificial intelligence and digitalization of education. So a very warm welcome to you, Sarah. Thank you so much for agreeing to present here. So it's over to you.
Thank you ever so much, and thank you very much for inviting me. And it's really nice to kind of come and talk to other people around how we kind of navigate the challenges on an educational pathway, because it doesn't appear to be a particularly smooth pathway. We tend to have a number of challenges that we kind of have to navigate. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a few things that I think have perhaps been particularly useful. I mean, I don't think it's a particularly a how-to guide, but I think I'm going to sort of like raise a few issues. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've done, and I'm really happy to answer any questions, or I'm really happy to do kind of any follow-up with anybody afterwards if that's going to be particularly useful. So obviously, because I'm academic, I like to have a slide, so I've got some slides. So I'll kind of talk through my slides, and I think they'll probably take around sort of about half an hour or so, and then I think we'll then move to kind of questions. But if anyone wants to drop kind of like loads of questions in the chat, or if you want to stop me and ask me to dive into something a little bit deeper, then I'm super happy to do so. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that. If you can't see that, please tell me. So as I said, thanks, great. We can see everything. That's always good. So when I was really hugely honoured to ask to do this talk, I was trying to think about how would I want to present it and what might be kind of like useful. So I came up with the 3 E's, which were endurance, education, and excellence. And while I was actually writing the slides, I had to keep reminding myself which order I'd put everything in. I mean, I don't think they go in a particular order. But what I tried to speak to was how we have to work within the promotion criteria, and how we can use perhaps what we do and our focus to ensure that we are successful and we're able to navigate the challenging process of academic promotions. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about me, because I don't like talking about myself. I find it quite itchy and a bit uncomfortable. So I talk a little bit about me. I'm going to say why I chose the 3 E's particularly. I want to mention the structural barriers, because I think if we don't talk about the structural barriers, then we can't work out how we navigate them and how we raise the issues within our institutions to overcome the structural barriers. Then I'll talk a bit about each of the 3 E's and why I think they're particularly useful in terms of promotion. Say yes will become a little bit clearer a little bit later on, so I'm just going to leave that one there. And in our discussions, we thought that sort of ending with a sort of final top tips would be really helpful, and that's how we'll end with like a few kind of sort of like top tips. So a little bit about me. So I've been an academic for over 20 years now, which is quite frightening when I actually count up those amount of years. I previously had a career in the retail sector, so that's why I'm a retail based academic. I like to do things kind of quite logically. So I previously worked for one of the big retailers and worked in lots of innovations, and then brought that into my academic career. So because of that, I'm a marketing academic. So I'm in Birmingham Business School in the marketing department. But as I've been mentioned, I also work for our college as well. And I think I just sort of listed a little bit of what I do, and I thought this really speaks to what academics are like and what our promotion criteria are like, is that we tend to end up wearing multiple hats so that we can fulfill the criteria. So obviously I'm a teacher, I'm a researcher. As I've been mentioned, I was formerly director of transnational education, so working across our other campuses that we have here. And then I moved into digital education. Well, actually, at the same time, I moved into digital education as well, but that just came a bigger part of my life. And then I turned out to end up being a content creator. I'm currently deputy head of our marketing department, alongside my role as deputy director of education digital for our college, which comprises of 4 schools. So we have obviously the business school, but also the School of Education, Social Policy and Government. And really, I look after anything that is digital pedagogies based, but also I look after our distance learning courses, micro credentials, etc. I do a little bit of kind of media commentary around the retail sector. I'll explain sort of how that came about a little bit later on. And I think it's important to kind of also raise the fact that I also try and be a parent as well. And I've been married for 22 years, which again is a frightening amount of time, because that makes me think that I'm really old now when I have to say that. And I think, you know, it can be difficult because academia is such an all-encompassing life, and we end up doing lots of things at kind of like weekends, at kind of like out of hours. You know, teaching days are very long, so our timetable Monday to Thursday is 9 till 7 and Friday 9 till 6. And probably your childcare is probably like ours, where our childcare around here tends to close at about 6. So, you know, that presented numerous challenges. She's a bit older now, so it's a little bit easier because she's now, well, she was 17 actually on Wednesday, so she's a little bit older now. And I think I always feel slightly disingenuous trying to give lots of careers advice to people, because I don't feel I've been strategic. I don't think I've planned my career. But I think one thing that's I've always stayed true to is I've done what I love, or if I didn't love it, then I certainly strongly believed in it. And I think that's been a real core that's gone through my career. So when I've moved to kind of like digital education, that's because I was trying to look at some of the challenges that students had in my classroom. How could I use the emerging digital space to kind of like overcome that? I've done a lot of work in authentic assessments, which is trying to address employability issues for my students. So I haven't really done things with the idea that they would meet a promotion criteria. It's just happened that I've been able to now create a narrative where in the space of 3 days, my entire academic career came together. And on the Monday, so this is a week in July, and on the Monday I found out, and I was hugely honoured to be awarded a National Teaching Fellowship from Advance HE, which I'm still not beyond just how honoured I am, and I think that's going to carry on for quite a while, because it's just a huge honour from Advance HE. And then 2 days later, I found out that my application for professor had been successful. So everything literally came together. An entire career came together in the space of 3 days. So why did I pick the 3 E's as opposed to any other title for this talk? Well, and I'll explain a little bit more about these in a bit more detail. But I think certainly with promotion, what you're trying to demonstrate is a sustained trajectory. So it's endurance. So it's over a period of time. So it's not necessarily one-off things that you've done, but how do they factor in to your overall academic picture? Of course, as academic focused obviously colleagues, because we're completely focused on the education pathway. Of course, education is key, but I think what is the issue here is how we articulate that. And I'll talk about the challenges in a moment, but I think one of the biggest challenges is sometimes it's not very clear what promotion committees are looking for in education. So it's quite kind of blurry, and they use this word excellence, and that's the big question, I think. What does excellent look like in education? So I'll talk around those 3 in a moment, but first of all, I want to just sort of slightly touch on the sort of challenges that we find ourselves in. Now, I don't know if anybody likes The Good Place. I won't give any spoilers if you haven't seen it, but in our house, we are huge fans of The Good Place. Myself and my daughter have probably watched this like about 5 times now, so we can probably quote the entire show. But I really like this quote from one of the characters. And if you haven't seen it, it's a great show, and it's about moral philosophy set in The Good Place. And I'll just kind of leave it there, but it's definitely worth watching. And this is a quote: is, I guess all I can do is embrace the pandemonium, find happiness in the unique insanity of being here now. Now, I don't know about you, but that makes me think that fits quite well for being at a university and trying to be an academic and navigate your way through the challenging promotion criteria. And I think what we have to do is try and embrace the criteria that we have, and it's working out how do we navigate around those criteria. So for ourselves, we are pushing forward a definition of what excellence in education looks like. What is international recognition in education? So for our promotion criteria, part of being for your professor application is showing your international recognition. But how do you do that in an education context when often we're very internally focused? So how do you demonstrate that externality? So we do have numerous structural barriers. So I think the promotions process itself can be difficult to kind of navigate when we're on education focused contracts. Job ads, so trying to move around, like looking at, how many ads do we see that are education focused versus research focused? I think we probably all agree that there's certainly fewer of those. So what type of skills are we trying to demonstrate? We might not be able to be mobile, particularly if we've got kind of caring responsibilities. We might be tied to particular areas, so that inhibits our experience. Or when we've got criteria that, for example, say, well, you've got to be kind of nationally recognized, but actually if you can't be mobile, then how do we kind of navigate around that so that we can demonstrate that? Of course, we've got things like the pay gap. So all institutions have to report on their gender pay gap, and most institutions do have quite a significant pay gap. And also we have the pyramid, and particularly on education focused contracts, we tend to have like lots of people at the bottom, a few people in the middle, and only a couple of people right at the top. Pedagogy isn't necessarily always valued, and it's trying to identify what does value look like when we're trying to express our pedagogy. Of course, there's the obvious one, maternity leave, and then time out has a big impact on careers. And again, how do we articulate that in a way to demonstrate that, you know, we had to have time out? How do we access opportunities? So again, when you're on a teaching contract, quite often by its very nature, you've got a lot of teaching. So if you've got a lot of teaching, how do you then try and do additional things actually at the same time? Because it's difficult to balance everything. And I think this is a huge question. I think the sector, whilst they know what teaching excellence is, and of course we have things like TEF, etc., but how is that articulated at an individual level when we're applying for various promotions? And I think, you know, stereotyping, I think, is still here in the promotions process. I mean, that was just a quick Google of a professor, and that's what came up. And I don't think anybody looks like that, but that's what came up. And I think we can all see the challenges within that stereotypical image there. So that was a 2-second Google just to show me some images of a professor. And I can only sort of talk a bit about how I felt in my career, but actually, you know, hugely in terms of being on the education pathway, you know, not feeling valued, not feeling like I was kind of like proper, and, you know, massively having this kind of like imposter syndrome, like, should I even be here at all? If this is what my role is, should I kind of be here? And how do you kind of navigate and overcome that? So I still feel slightly baffled. And I still like, so when someone calls me professor like today, I'm like, oh, that is me. Hang on, who are we looking for? Who's the other person? Where are they standing? Oh, hang on, it's me. And I still am slightly in awe of that and find it difficult to believe. I'm hoping it will sink in. Maybe in a year or two it will kind of sink in. So I want to sort of explain a little bit how I've tried to overcome some of these things, particularly around what is teaching excellence. How do we kind of overcome the kind of stereotypes, and how can we do this? So let's have a look at the kind of like 3 E's. So as I said, most promotion criteria are really looking for you to demonstrate teaching excellence over a period of time. So it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I think the old adage, I think, is true there. And again, the criteria tend to make reference to sustained bodies of work. And I will talk a little bit about this in education. But I think one of the things that can be really helpful is to create your expertise in your area. So it's your area. It's not no one else's area, but it's your area. And because I'd really focused on digital education and had started to kind of really say, well, this is really part of kind of who I am, that enabled me to find new career opportunities, but I could also show a sustained trajectory. So I could really show a path for when someone said, hey, do you want to work on this new thing that's like distance learning? Are you interested? Which was like, oh, yeah, sounds good. May as well do that. To actually becoming a, you know, deputy director of education for our college. We're one of the largest colleges in our institution. Our business school is actually, you know, larger than some colleges just itself. So I'm able to, you know, demonstrate that trajectory and that kind of pathway. And therefore, what I'm trying to do as well is sort of to kind of role model this. So kind of, you know, trying to demonstrate, you know, how we do bring together departments and services. So that's what a lot of my job is bringing people to kind of together, but also trying to demonstrate that, you know, when you come back from a period of leave, how do you then move forward? Because it's one of those things that isn't kind of really spoken about. It's kind of, well, you go on your period of leave, but then how do you move from that, and how do you move to your criteria? Because it is difficult, and I certainly found the challenge from being a lecturer to senior lecturer, or assistant to associate, I found that very difficult because I had leave. I'd had a period of very significant ill health where I'd had to really drop my working hours because I was very poorly. And then it's how to overcome that, and then how to sort of demonstrate that I had met the criteria. So I think that was certainly a kind of core challenge. And what I'm hoping to do by kind of doing kind of these talks and things, and you know, certainly supporting our colleagues, is to try and show a little bit about what is possible. So as I said, with and I think particularly with education, it's very easy to kind of do lots and lots and lots of small things. You know, there's always something new that comes up. There's always new topics that we can look at. So I think part of the promotion criteria, as I said, is trying to find your story and to focus. And I will talk a bit more about that in the say yes part as well. So by becoming known for a key aspect of educational delivery, that is your story, and you can create an excellent narrative on what your particular themes are. So when I wrote my professor application, I actually had a Venn diagram. Now, this will become as no surprise to anybody who knows me that I had a spreadsheet with every single promotion criteria. I had a spreadsheet as how I'd met them. I'd identified where the gaps were working with my mentor, and no one is surprised when I say, yeah, I had a whole spreadsheet with everything written down on it with the various sections for our form. And I'd focused on these three. So they were digital, retail, and employability. They were a Venn diagram, and obviously they crossed over in the center. But then I was able to articulate, you know, my story. So I came from an industry background. I had developed this expertise in digital education, and I was particularly focused on how to get students demonstrating the various employability skills that they need to do. So I was kind of laser focused on those. And whilst, of course, there are things that I do that don't fit into those, when I was articulating who I am, I really focused on those three. So it was a coherent assessment. Now, there's more things that I've done, and I'm very happy to talk about. So, you know, one of the things that I did, I developed about 8 years ago. I think I talk about this a little bit later on, but I developed this quite unique assessment that I've been able to kind of use and, you know, articulate, you know, how I've worked with employers, kind of, etc. And I can, you know, demonstrate student journeys and things like that. So I was kind of really focused on those three areas. I think getting the relevant external recognition, so whether it's senior fellowship or things like that, again, I think are really important. And also asking to go on relevant courses. So BAM run some great courses for education focused professors. So I think, you know, again, sort of like saying, right, look, I want to progress, I want to develop, and kind of moving on. So as I said, I built my expertise in those three core areas, and I could kind of like, you know, demonstrate that I kind of, you know, was a leader in digital education, that I did have this expertise mentioned in employability. I'd created this kind of like digital assessment. I've written various chapters for particular books on it, etc., published it in various places. And then retail as my core subject, I've written for various retail texts, services texts, etc. And then I was also able to weave these three strands together. And what I was able to do, I was able to kind of, you know, really have this narrative about who I am. So I think I would hope that when people were reading my form, it was quite clear that this is what Sarah is about. This is what she does. This is how she sees herself. This is how she's meeting the criteria, you know, within these core areas. I think excellence is a really tricky one. Because, you know, excellence is used all over the place, or certainly in our forms. You know, sustained and excellent, I think, must be the kind of most popular words. How do you kind of demonstrate excellent? Well, these are a few things that I'd kind of like, thought that I think sort of helped. So as I said, I don't think I've been particularly strategic, and that is possibly to my detriment. But what I have done is I have really driven myself with what I believe in and what's really important to me. And I think I've often gone, there has to be a better way. I think that is one of my absolute mantras, is there has to be a better way. And therefore, I've been able to demonstrate excellence by saying, look, this is the situation, this is the problem, this is what I did about it, this is how I led it, and this is now the effect that it has. And really trying to challenge preconceived ideas, which I think in our institutions is difficult to do. We get lots of kind of, well, we've already kind of like tried that. And I'm a big believer of going like, well, let's just try it and let's sort of see what happens. And also, I think moving through, particularly, I think from associate to chair, one of the things I had to let go of, which doesn't sit very easily with me, was to try and let things go wrong and try a few things, try a few avenues, try and see what worked. And when it didn't, having to like go back and either redo things or reapply or ask for people again or have to go just a different route. I think if I hadn't opened myself to try things, I don't think I would have got perhaps where I am, because it was trying to fill those really nebulous criteria, which I think are difficult for ourselves as education focused colleagues, and particularly around that international recognition, etc. And then sometimes, because I was sort of like, I have the sort of brain that is awake at 3 a.m. I'm a chronic insomniac. I do lots of work in my head at 3 a.m. just thinking about things that I'm going to do, but I often have ideas at that time. So I I got into the roles. To a certain extent, it is always the right place at the right time, but certainly that willingness to be like a problem solver has really, helped me in my career. And I think this is why, when I've said yes, so I think, again, I sort of had the 3 E's, but I also have this thing about, saying yes to things. And I've often said things that at first glance might sound like either, well, that's kind of like a dream, or kind of like, can we kind of really do this? And I've really kind of gone with the motto that, right, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to do my very best. And I'm going to kind of problem solve. So someone just said, do you want to come and work with me in transnational education? I went, yeah, why not? Sounds quite good. May as well do that. And then that obviously led ultimately to my role. I worked on our Dubai campus. And then someone did literally send an email saying, does anyone want to work on this new online idea? I went, yeah, that sounds good. And actually saying yes to that one was hugely pivotal. And I think if I'd have thought about it properly, I probably wouldn't have said yes. But saying yes to that was absolutely pivotal. And a lot of my career has just been because one day I answered an email and I said, yeah, it sounds great. And then I started blogging as well, because I was a bit like, hang on, I want to say something here. I have something to say about this. I want to talk about what's happening in this sector, why this is happening, and I want to help people understand and be able to kind of navigate around. So I take a very neutral position, but what I do is a lot of explaining about, I've done a lot of work on the cost of living and kind of price increases and kind of things like that. So I think it was that combination of being receptive to new ideas, but also saying yes to what I believed in as well, and then expanding that and doing what I love. So in my top tips as well, I do have say no. So it's not say yes to everything, but also say no as well. But the reason why this has been so pivotal and important for promotions is because I was able to become an expert when no one else was, which gave me opportunity. So even as a very junior member of staff, because I was actually just a teaching fellow, so I've moved from teaching fellow to lecturer to senior lecturer, or to professor, or obviously that one is very recent. So I was a teaching fellow when I was director of T&E, but I was given opportunities that wouldn't be available to me because people were like, oh, hang on, we need this person to talk to whoever it is. And again, that was enabling me to kind of like build my kind of credibility and build my reputation. And I think one thing that's important, because I have to say, I haven't talked massively about students in this talk because I focused it more sort of on our journeys. But one thing that is really important to me personally is to make a positive difference to students and their life journeys. I am a first generation university student. In our house, no one had actually ever stayed on to school beyond 16. So I was the first person to do post 16 education. I was the first person to go to university. I had a lot of challenges as a child, including having a parent who died very early on. So I had a lot of challenges. And one of the things I really believe in is in the transformative power of education. And when I teach, that's what I want. I want people to be able to transform their lives via their education, as well as also, you know, being given opportunities. You know, I've been able to lead and implement a vision as well, which was challenging at times through COVID. I will be honest, it was challenging. I've actually changed education, so I've actually changed the way in which we practice education via some of the work. I've created a great network as well, that's internal and external. And I think importantly, it's getting to meet people who will champion you. Because we can't do this by ourselves. And we need people who are on our side, who can mentor us and who can help us. And also, I've met great people that I wouldn't normally meet. I mean, Birmingham is a massive institution, so we do tend to be quite siloed. We do tend to sit in our own schools and own colleges. And I've worked with such fantastic colleagues from across the institution who normally I would never see. And as I say, you almost then become the possessor of knowledge, which opens up new doors. It takes you on a path that you would never imagined. I certainly didn't think I would be stood here. If you'd have asked me 10 years ago, when I was making multiple applications for my promotion to senior lecturer, I would never have said I would be have stood here today. I wouldn't have believed it. And I think you never know what might happen sometimes of going, yeah, do you know what, actually, let's kind of go for that and let's kind of do that. And I think hopefully, I've got a good reputation of someone who can do. And I think that came across particularly in the leadership aspect. So on our promotion criteria, one of the parts of the form that we have to fill in is on leadership. So I was able to really articulate, again, this journey, but also how I'd led and I'd make kind of change. So I think we're okay for time. Hopefully we're okay. Yeah, good. So these are my kind of like final kind of like sort of hints. I think absolutely understand your promotions criteria, your university's promotion criteria. What do they look like? Because they're probably slightly different to ours. But what actually do they look like? Like I said, I had a giant spreadsheet when I was going for professors. So they changed the criteria in between my senior lecturer and my professor application. So I had a new set of criteria that I was working to. And ours are actually all listed out. So say I created a spreadsheet for each of the 5 sections that we had to fill in. I'd identified the criteria. I'd mapped what I'd done. And then a few years ago, I was working with my mentor and we'd identified the deal breakers. And I think that's really important. You have to be really honest. What do you not have that you will need? So what are they absolutely looking for? So one of the things I really needed to sort out was international recognition, because that was going to be my weakest area. And I really had to make sure how I was able to develop that, because there are, unless you're kind of ready to go for promotion in 2 weeks' time, there probably are going to be deal breakers. But I think also start small. It's not necessarily about trying to do everything. It's like, what small changes can you make that actually might make a kind of big difference? And I think talking this through with a mentor, I would have to say, I hope my mentor's ears are burning right now, because they were hugely instrumental. And but they were, as I've said, when it's time to submit, accept help from critical friends. And my mentor was a critical friend. So you don't want a mentor who's going to destroy your own self-confidence, so you don't think you can do anything. But you also don't need them to be your best friend either, because if they're your best friend, they're not going to be honest. So I would call them a critical friend, someone who is supportive, but is also going to be honest and is going to look at what you need to do and ask those difficult questions. Well, how are you going to get around that? What are you going to do? I found a great co-writer as well. So we often joke we have a bit of an economies of scale, but also our brains now think the same way, which is A, slightly terrifying, or B, works really well for us. So quite often if we're kind of doing a blog or something, one of us will start off and the other one will finish, but we know roughly how we kind of like work now, so we can get things out kind of quite quickly. Once you've got one criteria ticked off, you don't need to keep repeating it and doing it 72 times. So move on. Again, particularly if you've got deal breakers, if you've got something ticked off, focus on the deal breakers. I think tell your story, so yours and no one else's, so it's really clear who you are and how you present your educational journey. And when it's time to submit, accept help from critical friends. Again, this is something I'm very bad at, asking for help. I always put myself at the bottom of the list. There is always somebody else I can help. There is always more work to do. Or if I'm at home, I can always go and help with homework, or I can do something else. So I know that I put myself right down the bottom of the list. Just be clear, that's not a tip. Put yourself at the bottom. You got to move yourself up. And I find it very bad to say I need some help. So I had to sort of like slightly overcome that. And when people said, "Oh, you're submitting this year, do you want me to read your form?" I had to be brave enough to say yes. And I sent my form to people I really trusted. Again, people who I hugely respected, definitely not my friends, but people who I had huge respect for, and said, "Yeah, I'm going to take you up on that offer. Will you help me?" And again, that was hugely invaluable. So I think the very, very final top tips, say yes, say no as well. So sometimes you have to say no. Either I've done that, don't need to do it, or, you know, I'm kind of like moving on, or I've been on that committee for kind of 5 years. Do you know what? I need to focus on the deal breakers, or whatever it is. Look for opportunities. What can you, which is the bit, what can you say yes to? I think, you know, be brave, ask, I think, accept the world we're in, but we're going to navigate it with style. We're embracing the pandemonium and kind of moving on. And I think do what you love as well. I mean, as I said, you know, I haven't been particularly strategic. I haven't planned it. But the one thing I can say is I've been true to myself. And if I've said no to something, it was either because it didn't fit with my values, I wasn't comfortable kind of doing it. But I've really kind of tried to focus on sort of like who I am as well. And I think that's it. So I can probably stop sharing now. And I'm very happy to take questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah. I really love this idea of, well, there are a few things really, being true to yourself. That feels really, yeah, really true and authentic. And also not doing things with promotion criteria at the back of your mind. Also, that feeds into that, being true to yourself, having a focus and sustained trajectory. And I'm sure we'll have a discussion around that in a minute. And gaining that international recognition, that sounds really a grand challenge almost. So yeah, fantastic takeaways. Thank you so much.